Hello there. My name is Shelly and I'm 14. It's sunny outside, but I cannot leave my home. My parents had me put under house arrest because I accidentally helped the police catch a creepy runaway criminal. The story began 2 months ago when my folks sent me to a summer camp. They insisted on getting rid of me because they've been going through a painful divorce process. I didn't want to go to camp, but the alternative was much worse. Summer vacation at my awful grandparents' house in the middle of nowhere. Everyone in the camp was very happy, which was annoying. I'm not into all those stupid music concerts and group sports activities. So the very first day I skipped the morning exercises and enjoyed myself while hiding in the woods with a book instead. Suddenly, our camp counselors Nancy and Sarah found me and started to call me back for lunch, but I ignored them. Nancy got angry and asked, "Shelly, are you deaf?" I wanted to make her feel uncomfortable, so when they came closer, I said, "Excuse me, I'm deaf in one ear and have only 35% hearing in the other. What did you say?" I made the saddest face in the world and added that my parents had probably forgotten to warn the camp administration because they didn't really care about me. Nancy and Sarah looked like they wanted to adopt me at that moment. I didn't expect this, but they believed me. Rumors about my disability spread very quickly. It was a great excuse to avoid all the annoying camp activities and the perfect cover to listen to all the gossip. Everyone was asked to treat me properly. Even the mean girls bullied me much less than other girls. The next week, I enjoyed swimming and reading books, and I learned to tie knots and shoot from a bow. And then I met my summer crush at an archery class. Steve. It was love at first sight. I helped him learn to shoot, and we had such a great time. After the class, we went for a walk in the woods. It was easy to get close to him because he thought that I could barely hear him. So he was looking into my eyes and touching my shoulder the whole time. I was looking into his eyes too and couldn't believe that he was excited. After a couple of days, we spent a lot of time together, and I began to feel guilty for lying about my fake disability. But I hesitated to reveal the truth at this point. Meanwhile, I overheard girls from my cabin discussing Steve. They said he had been expelled from several schools for bad behavior. He was very attractive, and several girls also had a crush on him, including the prettiest girl in our cabin, Meg. She was working on a plan for how to become his girlfriend. I was desperate. I thought I could not compete with such a beauty. But Steve thought otherwise. In the evening, we had a disco party. He invited me to dance in front of everyone. He said that he was sick of all those annoying popular girls and felt very comfortable with me. He asked me to be his girlfriend. I agreed, and then he kissed me. It was my first kiss with a boy ever, and it was very romantic. Meanwhile, Meg was staring at me with hate all evening. After lights out, I was laying in my bunk thinking about my brand new boyfriend, but Meg was whispering to her friend that the deaf girl was not competition for her. She decided to get revenge on me that night and covered my hair with toothpaste while I was sleeping. The next day, I told Steve about it, and he decided to cheer me up and tell me a secret. The camp policy prohibited any access to the internet for campers, and that included using cell phones. But my boyfriend cheated. He had taken a second cheap cell phone with him and hidden it in a small waterproof bag under the roots of a big tree. We spent some time hiding from the counselors, watching YouTube videos, and kissing. I was so happy. But suddenly, Steve received a mysterious message from unknown number saying, "When will we meet? I miss you." Steve told me that it was a joke and changed the subject. But it seemed very suspicious. In the middle of the night, I woke up and saw Meg coming back from somewhere. Her hair and swimsuit were wet. She was walking outside and swimming after lights out. When she noticed that I was awake, she whispered in my ear that she had a great date with Steve and sprinkled water on me from her hair. I couldn't sleep that night. I was consumed by my anxiety and jealousy. In the morning after breakfast, I asked Steve about last night. He told me that Meg was lying and trying to get us to fight. I noticed that he had taken some food from the canteen and put it in a special bag to take with him. He told me that he wanted to feed the birds, but it's unlikely that birds would have appreciated sausages and lasagna, right? Steve was acting very weird. He refused to go to the archery class with me because he was busy. Of course, I suspected him of cheating on me with Meg, so I lost my patience and decided to secretly follow him. Steve went into the forest, alone. He was making his way through the trees like he knew exactly where to go. After around 30 minutes, we arrived at the final destination, an abandoned hut in the middle of the forest. I hid behind some trees. Steve knocked on the door 3 times and I heard sounds from the hut. Some strange hobo came out of the hut and hugged Steve. Steve gave him the food and they had a brief conversation like good old friends. Then Steve promised to come back tomorrow and left. I followed him back because I didn't remember the route at all. The next day, I followed him again. Steve brought the hobo some old books and medicine to bandage a wound on his arm. Steve helped the hobo with his wound and they had a picnic together. I wanted to join them, but I was too scared. Steve told the hobo that he could come over to the camp to take a shower and shave after lights out. Later that night, we had a campfire gathering. I asked Steve whether he wanted to tell me anything, but he kept silent. Meg flirted with him all night as if he were her boyfriend and not mine. Steve was very tense. As for me, I was wondering who that guy was in the forest and why Steve was so attached to him. In a couple of days, I decided to follow Steve again. I got closer so I could listen to their conversation, and I heard Steve calling the hobo Dad. Of course, that explained a lot. But I was confused. Steve told me that his father had left his family a long time ago. From their conversation, I managed to learn that Steve's father was hiding from the police because he was accused of robbing the company where he used to work. Steve agreed to help when his father contacted him several days ago. He was sure that his father wasn't guilty. Otherwise, why would someone who had stolen tons of money hide in the forest, right? On the way back to camp, the weather got bad and I almost got caught. It began to rain and I stumbled on a root. Steve stopped for a second and looked around, but then he continued his journey. I didn't see Steve at the cafeteria during dinner. His counselor, Robert, said that Steve had come down with a cold and he wouldn't allow me to go talk to him. The next morning, it turned out that Steve had pneumonia. He was taken to the hospital by ambulance at night. Robert said that Steve would be hospitalized for at least 10 days. I felt so sorry for him, and I was not allowed to visit him. Meg was upset too. I was the only person who knew about his father. I considered telling Nancy everything, but I hesitated because I didn't want to let Steve down and reveal the truth about my fake disability. 3 days later, I decided to bring some food to his father on my own and tell him the bad news about Steve's illness. So I went to the forest. I was very scared, but I was sure that I was doing the right thing. When I approached the hut, I knocked 3 times. Steve's father crawled out of his sanctuary and saw me. He panicked and began to yell, "Who the hell are you? How did you find me?" He grabbed my arm. I was very scared and petrified, and I began to cry. I told him that I was Shelley, Steve's girlfriend, and gave him the food. But he called me a liar. Steve told him that his girlfriend's name was Meg. I began to cry even more. He wouldn't let go of my hand. He took a rope and tied me to a tree to prevent me from running away and giving his coordinates away. I was terrified and I had to pee, but he told me to calm down and wait. He packed his bag and covered all of his footprints very quickly. Then he got closer and I prepared to die. But he said, "Now you can untie yourself, girl. Thanks for the food." And he ran away. I untied myself in 2 minutes, ran to Nancy and told her everything. Nancy called the police, my parents, and Steve's mother. It turned out that they had faced several mysterious thefts on the territory of the camp during that season. Nancy wasn't mad at me for lying about my disability at all. She was just glad that I was safe. In our cabin, Nancy and I interrogated Meg. She confirmed that Steve never took me seriously. He was having a relationship with Meg behind my back, and they made fun of me and my non-existent disability. But Meg had no idea about his father. I was so overwhelmed that I didn't have the energy to hate them. My parents took me home and grounded me. It was kind of nice to get their attention because I missed them. After a week, they took me to the police station to identify Steve's father. He was caught and put in a jail. It turned out that he had robbed several stores and houses and wasn't as innocent as Steve thought. The camp administration wanted to keep this scandal quiet to protect their reputation. That's why I won't reveal the name of the camp. But I just couldn't help to tell you this crazy story. As for Steve, he's healthy now, but he hates me and blames me for putting his father in prison. At the end of the day, it's not my fault that Steve was a dirty liar and that his father was a criminal, is it?